You consume more news than ever. You feel less informed than ever. Something's backwards. Here's what's confusing. The more you follow the news, the less you understand what's actually happening. You know this. Everyone knows this. You read breaking updates constantly. You can't explain long term trends. You track daily headlines. You miss structural changes. You follow expert analysis. You feel more confused afterward. This shouldn't make sense. If information increases, understanding should increase. If coverage expands, clarity should expand. If access improves, comprehension should improve. The standard explanations don't work. It's not that people are lazy, it's not that journalists are bad, it's not that information is scarce. Something else is happening. The more news you consume, the less you understand. The pattern is reliable. The cause stays invisible. What Watch what actually happens. Someone wants to understand a topic. They read breaking news. They follow updates. They consume expert takes. An hour passes. They seen 12 pieces about the issue. They understand it less than before they started. This keeps happening because updates feel like understanding. Coverage feels like clarity. Following feels like learning. The feeling arrives instantly. The confusion shows up later. You've done this. You read breaking news about an economic policy. You feel informed. You can't explain the policy. You follow election coverage constantly. You feel engaged. You don't understand the actual forces moving votes. You consume expert analysis on conflicts. You feel educated. You can't predict what happens next. The feeling is real. The understanding didn't arrive. News makes you better at recognizing today's terminology. It makes you worse at understanding yesterday's causes or predicting tomorrow's effects. Here's the structure: news optimizes for update speed, not comprehension depth, for event coverage, not pattern recognition, for what changed today, not what's been true for years. This isn't about bias. This is about update frequency under competitive measure. When every outlet competes on speed, when every story is measured by immediacy, when every update is optimized for maximum difference from the last update, the system selects for whatever changed most recently, not what matters most. What's newest? Breaking news wins because it delivers the feeling of being informed immediately. You see something happen, you read it about instantly. You feel like you know what's going on. The loop closes in minutes. Context loses because it requires time. Background takes paragraphs. Causes take history. Trends take years. The platform can't measure understanding 6 months after reading. It measures engagement 6 seconds after clicking. This makes breaking news looks like success: high clicks, high shares, high retention. The metrics say people want it, and they do in the moment. But here's what the metrics can't see: breaking news depletes the capacity it claims to build. Every time you consume an update without context, you train event tracking instead of pattern recognition. Every time you follow breaking coverage instead of reading analysis, you build recency bias instead of casual understanding. Every time you feel informed by knowing what happened today without knowing why it happened or what happens next, you compound the gap between following and understanding. The cost is invisible until you try to explain something. Then the gap becomes obvious. This is why people who consume no news often understand more than people who follow it obsessively. They're not better informed about today. They're better calibrated about always. Watch what happens when someone tries to stay informed through breaking news. They optimize update frequency. Their event knowledge increases. Their pattern recognition doesn't. They don't know what happened yesterday. They can't explain why it happened or predict what happens tomorrow. The gap widens. Here's the asymmetry. Breaking news selects for people who want to feel informed. Deep analysis repels them. You can't convert update seekers into pattern recognizers by making analysis more engaging. Different goal, different behavior, different information architecture required. The people who benefit from understanding don't optimize for feeling informed today. They optimize for predicting accurately tomorrow. Different goal, different consumption pattern, different compound curve entirely. News consumption is event collection. Understanding is pattern recognition. These build separately. Consuming more events doesn't build pattern recognition, it crowds it out. You're training the wrong capacity. This pattern is old, older than digital news, older than television, older than newspapers. Any system that rewards immediate novelty over accumulated understanding produces the same result. Gossip outcompetes wisdom, rumors outcompete investigation, breaking updates outcompete comprehensive analysis. The difference now is update density. When you couldn't track every development, you couldn't optimize for pure novelty. You had to provide some context because readers couldn't follow without it. The lag forced synthesis. Now you can. Every outlet knows the exact second someone clicks away. Every platform sees the exact moment attention drops. Every algorithm learns the exact pattern that keeps people consuming longest. The measurement doesn't create the preference, it amplifies it. Humans always prefer novelty over comprehension, updates over understanding, following over analyzing. The preference was constrained by update frequency. Now it isn't. This is what acceleration looks like. The gap between consuming information and building understanding keeps widening. The gap between following events and recognizing patterns keeps growing. The gap between feeling informed and being able to keep understanding expands. All gaps that already existed, just faster now, more extreme now, more measured now. Here's what this explains that normally stays invisible. Why informed people feel stupider after following the news. The news isn't making them feel stupid. Because the gap is making them stupider. They're building event tracking speed without building pattern recognition capacity. They can identify what happened faster. They can't explain why it happened or what happens next any better. This mismatch creates the feeling of declined comprehension. At this point, there are only two paths. Path A: if this pattern continues, you keep consuming breaking news for the next 12 months. Your event knowledge compounds. You know what happened yesterday. You know what's happening today. Your update speed increases. Your ability to explain why things happen doesn't. 6 months in, you've consumed thousands of news pieces. You can recite recent events. Someone asks you to explain the actual forces of driving those events. You can't. You know what? You don't even know why. That gap widened while you were optimizing the wrong capacity. 12 months in, you're exceptional at tracking current events. Your pattern recognition capacity stayed flat. You're better at following. You're not better at understanding. You spent a year training event collection when you needed pattern recognition. The time horizon collapsed. Every month spent consuming updates was a month not spent building casual models. Path B, if the pattern breaks, you stopped optimizing for feeling informed and start building actual understanding. The first month feels worse. Your event knowledge drops. You don't know what happened yesterday. You can't contribute to breaking news conversations. It feels like regression. 3 months in, something shifts. You're not confused about when today's news contradicts yesterday's news. You see the pattern, not the update. You're not frustrated when experts disagree. You understand the framework differences. The emotional pattern breaks, the structural pattern becomes visible. 6 months in, your ability to explain what's actually happening improved. Not because you followed more news, because you stopped trading the wrong capacity. You can predict better, you can explain better, you can understand the forces, not just the events. Your comprehension built slowly while everyone else update speed built quickly. Recovery cost asymmetry emerges after 12 months. Path A built exceptional event tracking instead of a broken information diet. Path B built pattern recognition. Only one of these lets you actually understand what's happening. The other just makes you better at feeling informed while staying confused. The way to see this clearly, ask what capacity you're actually building versus what capacity you think you're building. If you're consuming the breaking news, you're building event tracking. If you claim you're getting more informed, the frame is confused. Event tracking is not understanding. Knowing what happened is not knowing why it happened or what happens next. If you're following live coverage, you're building update consumption speed. If you expect to understand the topic better, the frame breaks. Update speed is not comprehension depth. Following developments is not recognizing patterns. This isn't critique, this is classification. Breaking news does exactly what it's designed to do, make you better at tracking events. If you want pattern recognition, you need different inputs, different information diet, different timeline, different capacity entirely. The confusion happens because platforms measure update engagement and call it information. They measure event following and call it education. They measure feeling informed and call it understanding. The metrics aren't wrong. They're measuring what they're measuring. You're just using them to predict something they don't track. Here's what you can't undo once you see it. Most content marketed as news is actually event tracking training. Most time spent following breaking coverage is time not spent building understanding. Most feeling of being informed is just familiar with today's terminology. The costs show up later, much later, years later. By the time you notice the gap, the compound has run. You're better at tracking events. You're worse at understanding causes. You can follow what's happening. You can't explain why it's happening or predict what happens next. The asymmetry is structural now. The system will keep producing breaking news. The incentives make that inevitable. The only question is whether you noticed what capacity you're actually building before the gap between becomes permanent.